Dance of Muses by Space Otter Publishing is a game for 2 to 4 players which plays in about 25 minutes for ages 14 and up. This is how you play the game. Setup. First, shuffle the 9 muses and distribute them randomly in equal numbers to each player. In a 2-player game, each player will have 4 muses. In a 3-player game, each player will have 3 muses. And in a 4-player game, each player will have 2 muses. In a 2 and 4-player game, there will be 1 muse left over, which is placed face down on the table in a 2-player game or face up in a 4-player game. Each player chooses dice of one color and takes a number of dice equal to the number of muses they have in hand. In a 4-player game, you play 2 versus 2 players. A team of players share the same dice, and they sit opposite from each other at the table. In 2 or 4-player games, you place 1 die of the unchosen color on the mysterious muse on the side with the value 1. Every player rolls a die, and the player with the highest value becomes the first player and places their first muse on the table chosen from their hand. After playing a muse, you put 1 of your dice on that muse with the value 1. Players take turns placing 1 of their muses on the table, plus 1 of their dice at value 1, until all muses are on the table. Muses placed after the first one must always be positioned adjacent orthogonally or diagonally to a muse already in play. 1 and only 1 of each player's muses, not necessarily the first one, must be played face down. This will be the masked muse. A masked muse is never uncovered until the very end of a hand. Once all 9 muses are placed, the dance can begin. Rules of play. The game is played in 3 hands, and each hand has a number of rounds in which each player takes their turns. A turn is divided into 2 actions: the dance step, which is mandatory, and an optional muse ability. During the mandatory dance step, a player must make any muse in play move 1 space horizontally or vertically. After taking that move, all muses must continue to be adjacent and in a single group. In this 2-player example, Calliope could move to the left or up on the grid 1 space, but she could not move to the right or down because that would disconnect her from the rest of the group. Likewise, Erato could not move up because that would disconnect Calliope from the group. And the same goes for the masked muse if Erato were to move down. She could also not move to the right because that would disconnect these 3 muses from the rest of the group. It is possible to make a dance move with 2 or more muses simultaneously, as long as they are aligned horizontally or vertically. This movement is called a group move. The muses involved will be pushed by the muse actually performing the dance step. A group move can also not result in disconnected muses, which means that in this example, Erato could also not move to the left, pushing Polyhymnia to the left as well, because that would leave Calliope and the masked muse on the right disconnected from the group. Polyhymnia, however, can move to the right, pushing Erato to the right as well. Now, all muses are still orthogonally or diagonally connected. After performing a dance step, the player must increase the dice values by 1 on all the muses who moved during this step. Before or after a dance step by an unmasked muse, you may optionally use the ability of the muse that performed the action and apply it to one of the muses that may be within the relevant area of effect. Masked muses do not have any abilities and can therefore not perform this action. The muse performing the action is considered the center of the pattern, and the positions where the ability can be applied are colored. In case of a group move, the muse that moved and pushed the others is the muse that uses the ability, not the muses that were pushed. In this case, the player who moved Polyhymnia is going to use her ability to increase the value of the die on Thalia. Note that it is never possible to apply the ability of a muse who is unable to perform her dance step. The muse's abilities come in 3 types. the +1 ability increases the value of a die by 1, in this case on any orthogonally adjacent tile, for example this one. The -1 ability decreases the value of a die in the affected area, in this case one of the diagonally adjacent squares, and the ability with the arrows swaps the value of one of the dice in the affected area, in this case any adjacent square, for example this one. Note that you should never swap the dice themselves, only their values. As soon as the die on any muse, even if masked, reaches a value of 6, the hand ends immediately. Any remaining possible actions are not taken. At this point, the masked muses are revealed, and then the players proceed to check which muse has performed the will of Apollo. This means if a die on a muse has the same value as the sun's next to the name of the muse, that die is set to the value of 6. The neutral die in a 2 or 4 player game is removed from the game. Then the dice of the same color are arranged in descending order, and by aligning the 2 or 3 rows of dice depending on the number of players, you compare the values by column and award 1 point to each player or team for each column where their die has the higher value. In case of a tie, no points are awarded. In this 2-player or 2-team example, in the first column there are 2 6s and therefore no points are scored. In the second column, the white team scores 1 point. In the third and fourth column, the black team both have the highest value and thus score 2 points. In a 3-player game, every player would only have 3 dice, and this is a scoring example. If there is no absolute majority, no players score any points, so in the first column there are 0 points. In the second column, the white player has the highest value on their dice, so they score 1 point. And in the third column, there is once again no absolute majority. 2 players have value 3, so no points are scored. Then the players reset the game and play 2 more hands, and the player or team with the most points after 3 hands wins the game. The game can also end after the second hand when a player or team has scored 7 points. And that is how you play Dance of Muses. Thanks for watching.